Finances are interesting because I feel like we live in a high inflation time where people are like, YOLO, buy the big house, take on debt, drive a Maserati, go to Europe for 3 months. And like we're all living in debt, not talking about it. I want to build generational wealth. Yeah, I want to have a savings account. Yeah, I want to be able to pay for these things. But I don't want to live in a box under a bridge and not do anything fun either. Like we all want happiness in our lives. If we're going to work 40 hours a week, let's get some joy for it.
In order to be intentional with your finances, I would say first you need to figure out, what is it that you want in life and start directing your money towards those sort of life goals. You need to direct your money instead of letting your money direct you. Most of the times, we're just mindlessly spending like, okay, I want to buy a drink here, or I'm going to go out to eat today because there's nothing in the fridge, or I didn't have time to make lunch. But instead of just kind of doing this mindless spending and acting upon our desires like immediately when we want them, before we make those purchases, we should ask ourselves, does this purchase really reflect what I value and the kind of life I want to create?
Corporate life is a game, but no one hands you the rule book. Here on Secrets of the Career Game, we break down the unspoken norms and behind-the-scenes dynamics shaping your career today. I'm Kendall Berg, that career coach, and I guide professionals to grow, advance, and lead with clarity. Each week, we explore the tools, habits, and conversations that build confidence, presence, and long-term momentum. Hello, hello. Today's guest is going to bring with her a wealth of knowledge. That was a pun. Get excited. Lucy, she is the creator behind the Lucy Space, and she is a corporate working mom / content creator, and she helps people live well financially, stylishly, and intentionally. Her content is amazing. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you should go over and check her out. But she has a background in law and in business, and she specializes in breaking down complex financial topics into real life strategies that are easy to understand and apply. She kind of blends that money, lifestyle, fashion, family, and gives tips, tricks, and tools so that people can build systems to feel confident with their finances. So Lucy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kendall, for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
We mentioned you have a background in law and business. What does that kind of look like? And then how did you get into creating financial lifestyle advice on the internet?
I've been a lawyer for, I think, 14 years now. And throughout my career of being a lawyer, I've always had like a side hustle. Started multiple businesses over the last 10 to 12 years, and they all came out of hobbies. And I got into the financial side of things from, actually, I had started social media back in 2012. Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been so long. But I actually started out doing fashion blogging. And so I ran a fashion blog, a YouTube channel, and I had Instagram. And then when I started having kids, all of that kind of died off because I just didn't have the time. And then so when my youngest one turned like 1.5, I felt like I had more time to get back into social media. But my interest had really changed after having kids. So I wasn't so much focused on fashion anymore. I was really interested in finances, building wealth, creating generational wealth. That's how I kind of pivoted into to the financial space.
Lucy, we'll have to have you back for another episode where you tell us what your skincare is. Because when you said you've been a lawyer for 14 years, I was like, who? Where? We'll have a separate chat about what skincare Lucy uses, and we'll tag it in the show notes. No, so I think that that's awesome, and I think it's a great expression of self too, to kind of be out here in the content creation space. So you talk a lot about being money smart, right? And I follow your content. I like your posts all the time. Where should somebody begin if maybe they don't have a ton of financial knowledge, or they feel like they're bad with money, or they're really struggling? Like, what is some advice that people can kind of start with?
So I would say that being money smart definitely isn't about having a finance degree. It's really just about understanding your habits, being intentional with your spending, and building different systems that support your life and your goals and, just what you envision for yourself. So the easiest way to start is by being aware, like what money is coming in, what money is going out, and what matters most to you in life. Like, where are your priorities in life? And then, just start small. You don't have to try to overhaul your entire financial life at once, but just, do small things. So you could start by saying, this week, I'm going to take a look at I'm going to track all of my expenses and see where my money's going. And then, just focus on clarity over perfection. You don't have to be perfect. You just really need to be clear about where your money is going.
So, how does that translate into being kind of intentional? Because we're talking about having visibility, about having clarity of what is happening with your money, which I'm sure even just that prompt gives some people a little bit of heartburn where they're like, I don't want to know. Right. I just came back from Disney with my kids and I was like, that is a bank account I don't want to look at for a little bit. It's going to need some time to breathe. Right. So they need to come to terms with, hey, here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. But where does intentionality fit in? Because you kind of mentioned, hey, what are your biggest priorities, right? One of your biggest priorities is building generational wealth. How can they kind of figure out what those priorities are? And then how can they bring that intentionality into their actual financial life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kendall. So, intentionality is all about like bridging how you want to live and how you're actually living. So, the best way that I can think of putting this in finances is you need to direct your money instead of letting your money direct you. So, most of the times, we're just mindlessly spending like, okay, I want to buy a drink here, or I'm going to go out to eat today because there's nothing in the fridge, or I didn't have time to make lunch. But instead of just kind of doing this mindless spending and acting upon our desires like immediately when we want them, before we make those purchases, we should ask ourselves, does this purchase really reflect what I value and the kind of life I want to create? So, in order to be intentional with your finances, I would say first you need to figure out what is it that you want in life? Do you want more time with your kids? Do you want your kids to be able to, start their adulthood with some amount of assets? Do you want to, is your ultimate goal to have a big house? You need to figure out what it is you want in life. That way you can be intentional about your money and start directing your money towards those sort of life goals.
Yeah. And obviously, this is easier said than done, right? Because
For sure.
I'm like, I want to build generational wealth and a cookie, right? I would like both. And I think that in that moment, we can feel that, you kind of mentioned it as like almost that like immediate dopamine rush of like, I want it and I got it. Right. I think this is like impulse shopping is a great example of this. Like I go out, I don't need any clothes. I see a shirt and I'm like, oh, shirt. And I need a shirt. Right. So
Yeah.
what are some tips in that moment that somebody can do to really assess? Like, yes, I'm hungry and there's nothing in the fridge, but my knee jerk reaction is to DoorDash or to run out and grab something to eat as opposed to what? Like, what's the alternative for people mentally? What exercises should they go through to kind of keep themselves from basically YOLO and doing it anyways?
Yeah. That's a very good question. So I would say that the biggest part of being intentional with your money is to plan ahead, right? Because it's very most people get stuck when it comes to being intentional because they're in that moment of decision making. It's just like you said, they're hungry, they look in their fridge and there's nothing there so they want to DoorDash. But if you spend a little bit of time every week just kind of pre-planning, it makes being intentional a lot easier. And so this is what I was talking about. You don't necessarily have to overhaul your entire life to be intentional. Like let's say you want to start with meals, right? I'm not going to DoorDash this week. That's my goal for the week. So then this week on Sunday night, you can sit down for 15 minutes, think about that. Well, that's my priority. And then you can make a list of everything you're going to eat for that week and then shop ahead groceries if you need to and make sure you plan out enough time to get back from the gym in time so you can cook dinner, things like that. Or if you want to say I'm not going to buy any clothes for this month, okay, well that's the goal that I'm going to do. And then so what are some things that you could do to help you with that? You can, if you see clothes you want when you go out, maybe put it down. Right, what I do is I write it down on like a 30-day wait list, right? So I make myself wait 30 days. Honestly, like in 99% of the time, like times where I do that, I end up not wanting the item after like a week. It's amazing. Just a little bit of like planning and just a little bit of allocating that like mental space towards these small goals can really help you, be intentional with your finances and your money.
I'm going to implement a 30-day wait list. I think that's brilliant. It's such a great idea. And I think you're right. I think of myself as like a foodie, right? I love food. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're not new, you already know this about me. But like for me, I love to eat and go out to eat. And like this is a big experience thing for me. And one of the things I did in 2026 is I was like, I want to eat less processed food. And so I started planning breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Here's what I'm going to eat, whether it's a leftover or I'm going to make this or I, need to have this going in the crock pot in the morning so that dinner's ready at night on a busy day where I don't have time to cook after I get home from work, whatever it is. And what I found is in the first 3 weeks that I did that, we didn't eat out at all. And we didn't even think about it. It's not like we wanted to and we didn't. We just didn't eat out because it wasn't necessary. We had all the food at home. It was cheaper. It was ready. It was either pre-cooked or pre-prepped or pre-cut or whatever it was. And it saved us so much money in those first 3 weeks that my husband and I were like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that just going to the grocery store without a grocery list was causing us so much pain later in the week. And so I think both of those are awesome tips. On the flip side of spending is how we save, right? And I would argue that the US does a horrible job educating us on how to save, on how to invest, because from a tax perspective, frankly, it doesn't incentivize the government. They don't want us to save because then they can't tax it. So separate conversation we could have about taxation policies. Anywho, how do people start to invest and save wisely? Because I think, especially in the US, there was a study I read recently that said the average American cannot cover a $400 emergency in cash. Like they just don't have $400 on hand. So what are some tips you recommend if somebody is maybe intimidated by investing or they don't know how or they were never taught so that they could kind of get started with building some of that growing wealth?
Yeah, so I would definitely start with education. Like that's always the first place to start. So don't start with trying to execute and going to invest, but learn the basics of investing. Like learn what index funds are, learn what compound growth is, learn what kind of risks that you might face when you invest. And then open an investment account. So you can open a brokerage account for buying stocks. You can open at Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, E-Trade. All of those are great. There's also Robinhood, a lot of different options. So open your own investment account or check if your employer offers retirement options like a 4K, an IRA. And then from there, automate your contributions. Every month when you get your paycheck into your bank account, you can set up this automatic transfer from your bank account into your brokerage account so that you have money deposited automatically and then you don't even have to think about it. And you can start with very small amounts. So you could do something like $50 a month, or if you don't have that, you could do $20 a month. But any amount will start creating momentum. And then once you have that momentum going, then it becomes much easier to start prioritizing, saving, and investing. But I think the most important thing to remember is that you don't need the perfect time to start. You just need to start and you just need to be consistent once you start.
Yeah. There's a book, I'm going to botch the title, listeners, and I apologize. I Will Make You Rich. I Will Help You Get Rich. I'm trying to remember. The author's name starts with a V. Anywho, I read this book, I think 2019, so right before 2020 hit. But in that book, he talks about exactly what you just mentioned of like, make sure you have the account, make sure the money's coming out of your account automatically, make sure you know how you want to invest it. Do you want mutual funds? Do you want index funds? Do you want bonds? Do you want, high APR savings accounts? Do you want CDs? Do you want, how you're going to invest it, which requires that base knowledge that you just outlined. I made a Schwab account in 2019 at his recommendation for that exact reason. And I think you're right. Once you start doing it, if you're just consistent, if it's just a set it and forget it, it's just going into the account, it's building, you're not looking at it. Odds are your banking and stuff is probably not with Schwab or Fidelity. So it's like an invisible account. It's going to grow and you're not going to feel so like tempted to constantly dip in. So I love that idea. Finances are interesting because I feel like we live in a high inflation time where people are like, YOLO, buy the big house, take on debt, drive a Maserati, go to Europe for 3 months, and like we're all living in debt and not talking about it. And one of the things you do really well on your page that I've always been really fascinated by is you have a little bit of that YOLO to you. You love to travel, and you do this like travel big but on a small budget. And so I think when somebody is taking control of their finances, it can feel really limiting. It can feel really constricting. Like, oh, I can't go out and eat because that's not my goal this week, or I can't DoorDash, or I can't spend this money because I need to put it in my investment account. But taking control of your money also frees you up to do the things you do want to do. So can you tell us a little bit about your like travel big, small budget that you run and like how people can kind of get those wins as well, even though they're taking control of their finances on the other side?
Yeah, for sure. I think you make a really good point there because, with social media, now. Obviously, like you're looking at so many different people's feeds and what they're doing, so you kind of get tempted to go out and spend. But there's definitely ways to live that like rich life, right? And travel big, but still do it intentionally and on a smaller budget. We love to travel. We travel a lot. We take several trips with our kids during the year. And there's several things we do to try to save money or try to spend as little as possible in order for us to be able to take multiple trips. So the first thing is that we plan very early. So just before the new year, we actually started thinking about what trips that we wanted to take this year. And we decided that our big trip we're going to try to do is to go to Paris and London around Christmas time this year. So like way later this year. And because we planned that for a year out, my husband has started looking at tickets and he's asked ChatGPT, so you can use AI for travel, but he's asked ChatGPT, when is the cheapest time to book tickets to go to Paris and London in December of 2026? And currently right now, if you were to buy tickets for then, it's about $530 for a round trip ticket, which I think is excellent for international travel.
Yes.
But we checked with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said if you just wait like a couple more weeks, prices should go down to like in the 450 to 470 range, which is crazy for international travel. So definitely plan early and be somewhat flexible with dates and destinations. So another thing sometimes we'll do is we'll pick where to go based on what tickets are the cheapest. Be open about where you're going, what dates you're going. That can really help. And then another thing we do is we try to use credit card points. So we rarely pay for hotels because when we spend, we put it on credit cards, and of course we pay it off and we're responsible. But you can rack up a lot of points just by putting spending on credit cards, and then we use those points to travel. And then also when we look for hotels, we try to find places that have kitchens. So usually like Residence Inns have kitchens, but when you have a kitchen, you don't always have to eat out. You can, you can cook in sometimes. The other thing is just prioritizing experiences over luxury price tags. So prioritizing going out and maybe doing a hike while you're traveling, or just seeing something that doesn't require a lot of money. So we do a lot of national park trips, and those, are very cost effective. Once you get there, there's nothing really to pay for. You just go and you do the hikes, you see the scenery, just enjoy nature. So lots of ways to travel big and enjoy, that luxury lifestyle on a small budget.
I love that idea of using AI to help you figure out when is the best time to buy. Because I've heard this tip of people saying like, oh, what's the cheapest place to go in March on spring break? Or what's the cheapest place to go in August if I want to take a trip? But the idea of saying, okay, when is it the cheapest to book this? And I recently had a trip I took with a girlfriend, and I booked my tickets, 4 months in advance, bought my tickets, we're all good to go. And like 3 weeks before, she's like, I can't go. And I was like, why not? She's like, because I just went to book the tickets and they're triple what it was 5 months ago. I was like, well, I bet they are, because we're supposed to go in like 3 weeks. And so there is this aspect of, costs do fluctuate over time, right? I'm taking a trip upcoming with my mom, and it's cheaper to fly Wednesday to Saturday than it is to fly Thursday to Sunday, right? So we shifted our trip one day because it saved, $500 on plane tickets or whatever the cost was. I love some of these because I do think when you're trying to take financial control, the struggle a lot of people have is they're like, yeah, I want to build generational wealth. Yeah, I want to have a savings account. Yeah, I want to be able to pay for these things, but I don't want to live in a box under a bridge and not do anything fun either. Like, we all want happiness in our lives. If we're going to work 40 hours a week, let's get some joy for it. But being intentional, to your point, planning ahead. Am I going to eat out this week? Am I going to do these things? Am I going to go shopping with my friends? Planning ahead. When do I want to travel? I think these are great tips. We tend to be reactive with joy. Like, but I want it, and it's me, and I can. And if you're in that financial position, great for you. But if you're trying to build some of that, being kind of intentional ahead of time is really wise. One of the other things I see a lot, and you even said it, you used to be a fashion blogger. All right, so pre-2020, I feel was like peak fashion influencer.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to use the Nordstrom sale as an example. If I saw one, I saw 1,000. Here's what to buy at the Nordstrom anniversary sale this year. Like, it was like the biggest event of the year if you were into fashion at the time. Influencers everywhere were posting about it. I think I had like a I had whatever the highest level Nordstrom was at that point in time. Don't judge me, okay? It was a lot. But people still want to feel stylish. They want to feel cool. A lot of people care about like sustainability and being smart with their money. So, how do people still have that fashion aspect, still build, a stylish wardrobe, cool things they want without feeling like they're overspending or, to your point, kind of being run by their money?
Yeah, so I would definitely start with like your typical, what you like to wear, like your uniform, the outfits that you naturally reach for, and then use that as a capsule foundation. So, building a capsule wardrobe, like a limited number of items that you really love and you wear over and over and that you can mix and match. And, try to incorporate like neutral colors, different versatile layers that you can use, and like I said, pieces that you can mix and match. And then from there, maybe every quarter or every month or whatever fits into your buying schedule, you can determine like, well, how many trendy pieces, or how many, maybe you need like a certain color piece. Maybe like every quarter you'll add like one trendy item, but really just creating that base capsule wardrobe of timeless, like key staples that you can rewear over and over, and that will work with any color, any trend. And then that way you've got this really strong foundation for a closet. And every so often you're just adding a few trendy or a few special pieces that you feel like you want to put into your closet to express yourself or express your style. And then the last thing is to track what you wear. So I do this I think it's fun. It's this fun series on stories. Almost every day I'll post a stories called Cost Per Wear. And I post my outfit of the day, and then I break down how much each piece of clothing in my outfit costs me per wear. And then when you track how often you wear an item, you can see whether that item was worth your money or not. So like some of my most worn items now only cost me like 10 cents per wear, whereas like some of my really expensive items I barely wear and they still cost me like $50 per wear. I don't like write down everything in my closet, but some of the major pieces that stand out, I'll just write it down in my notebook or my planner, and then every time I wear it, I'll just put a small tally mark, and then over time you can kind of see how many times you've worn it. And so you divide the original price by the number of times you've worn it, and then you get the cost per wear. So tracking your cost per wear will also tell you what to stop buying, because you can kind of see what's worth it, what's not.
So as a numbers person, I love this. I'm like, this sounds so fun. I'm going to start an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to put all my items in it, and I'm going to put what they cost, and I'm going to tally mark if I do it. And it's so great that you mentioned that. So I worked with a stylist, Samantha Don. She's been on the podcast before. I worked with her a couple years ago. And when we revamped my wardrobe at the time, it was wonderful. It's so helpful. And I still wear many of the pieces. But like this jacket that I'm wearing today happens to be one of the ones that we bought. And when we were doing this styling, I was like, I'm never going to wear this. Like in my head, I'm like, I don't know how to style this. I don't know what to wear it with. Like, when am I going to wear a leather blazer? That doesn't seem like a super common thing. And the first time I wore it with like a very dressy dress. Like I was out and about, very dressy. A regular leather jacket would not have worked, but I had the leather blazer and I was like, I've never worn it. Might as well throw it on. And I got compliments all day long. And it is now one of my most worn personality pieces of clothing, right? I wouldn't consider it a basic. It's a basic color, it's basic shape, but it's not a basic piece. And I wear it all the time because it's so fun with basics. It's so fun with something fancy if you want to dress it down a little bit. It's versatile if it's going to be cold or if you just want it as like a fashion piece. It's been one of those pieces that I added as a personality piece back then, but my cost per wear is probably like 50 cents per wear now because I use it so often. Meanwhile, I bought a shirt during that same exercise that I love. That's very me shirt. I think I've worn it once, maybe twice. And not because it's not fabulous, but it just wasn't as versatile with everything else that I had. So I love this idea of like start with a basic, add your personality pieces, and then even tracking this cost per wear is to me so fun because I'm like, then as I buy stuff, I can keep myself in check. Like, you said some things cost more. I would assume dresses cost more.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have like 50 dresses. I live in Colorado. It's warm 8 weeks a year. So I can only wear the dresses for 8 weeks. Yeah. And then in those 8 weeks, Like, how often am I repeating the same dress? Probably not super often. So, like, am I wearing it once a year? What's my cost per wear? So, I love this. These were all so helpful. So, Lucy, if somebody's listening to this episode and they're like, okay, I want to take control of my finances, I want to get better with my money, what's the number one piece of advice you would give them? Like, hey, tomorrow I want you to go do this thing, and this is going to help you get started. What would that be?
So I would say to start with a 15-minute like financial awareness or financial reset session with yourself. Sit down just 15 minutes a week. Honestly, that's all you need. And I know sometimes it's so hard for us to just do that because we have to face our finances, but that really is the first step. You just need to face your finances, look at your accounts, write down your top 3 spending categories, and then choose one category where you can make one small change for the week. And that's it. Like, that's the easiest, quickest place to start. And then once you do that, you'll realize, okay, it wasn't that bad. And you'll start to see that you're more aware of where your money is going, what you want to change, and you can be intentional for the week in that one area. And then from there, it'll snowball and you can get better and better with money.
But so, Lucy, this was such a great chat. If people are listening and they want to follow along with your content, they want to get more financial advice from you, what is the best place for them to go?
So I am on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, and my handle is the same across all of them. It's the Lucy Space.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure to put those in the show notes below. If you guys like today's episode, make sure you give us 5 stars. If you have any questions for Lucy or myself, put them in the comments below. Otherwise, Lucy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I feel like this was super helpful, and I think the audience is going to get a ton of great value from it.
Thank you so much, Kendall. I really enjoyed being here.